Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. I will read out the emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the entrance doors to the hall? Continue straight on and exit the building via the double doors on the right to the car park, which is the assembly point. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note, this meeting will be audio recorded, and switch off mobiles to turn them to silent. Members, there are 4 microphones on the tables for use during the meeting. When I invite you to speak, please wait until there is a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. Please, where possible, assist in passing microphones to each other and use the hand gel and antibacterial wipes on the tables if you do touch the microphones. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and against recommendations and will then ask for any abstentions. Excuse me. Right, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. We have received none in the office. Agenda item 2, substitute members. There are none. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. Councillor Hoy is in the building. Good evening. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of July 2021. Are the minutes agreed, members? Agenda item 5, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members? No. Agenda item 6, Audit Progress Report. This will be presented by Mr. Jim Caveney, but can you please note the title of this report states Audit Progress Report 2020-21. This should read Audit Progress Report 21-22. So the Principal Auditor, Internal Audit, Jim Caveney, will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. This is our first progress report covering this year's work. From May, our resource available has increased by the return from maternity leave of our auditor on a part-time basis. The first part of enclosure 1 on page 6.3 gives an outline of the work that was completed to the end of August, which is the point that this report was compiled. Work to identify and rectify fraud and error is substantially carried out by the Revenues and Benefits team. This is in addition to additional workloads undertaken to deal with the issues arising from the COVID pandemic. Data on page 6.4 provides details of amounts recovered by the team for the year to the 20th of August. A detailed summary of completed audit work is shown in Appendix 1 on page 6.5, with associated reports starting in Appendix 2 on page 6.7, with a light touch report in Appendix 3 on page 6.16. Appendix 4, starting on page 6.17, provides the current position on audit recommendations that were in place at the last session of this committee and details those raised since then. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Dray.
Thank you, Chairman. I note that Basildon Council have the role as Chief Audit Executive. I'm just wondering if they charge us for that, and if there is, what is the charge, matter of interest? And do Rochford District Council act as a Chief Audit Executive for any other council? Also, it was noted in the presentation at 1.6 that the full-time equivalent staff is, sorry, at 4.1, that the full-time equivalent staff is now 1.6. As a matter of opinion, is that adequate? Is that sufficient, adequate staffing?
Chair, do you want me to?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Dray, for your question. With regard to the Chief Audit Executive role provided by Basildon Council, yeah, that arrangement's been in place for a couple, probably 3 years now, isn't it? And basically that was because we didn't have a kind of suitable candidate available to us at Rochford, and it was felt that that was the best value for money solution for the council and provided the best expertise to us. That arrangement is chargeable, and it's charged on a sort of time basis. So yeah, we've got budget set aside for that, and we generally sort of underspend against that budget each year, but yeah, that it's charged out on the time actually spent.
Okay. Any idea of how much that is?
It's around kind of £13,000 to £15,000 per annum.
Okay.
But it does vary, as I say, on natural time spent. And with regard to the rest of the audit resource, Mike, obviously, as the Chief Audit Executive, has to take a view on the resource needed to deliver the audit plan each year, and he makes that assessment as part of the internal audit plan. It is felt that there's sufficient resource at the moment to carry out the audit plan, and obviously we have managed before Becky came back from maternity leave with just Mike and Jim. So yeah, with the 1.6 FTE, that provides sufficient resource to do what we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Can you wait for the microphone?
Regarding handling of customer complaints, have I gone too far forward?
What page are you on?
6.9. It says 12 out of 20 cases did not meet this expected timescale. So we're looking at the way that other departments respond to complaints, and I wondered what work's been done to improve that.
Chairman, thank you. The customer services team have taken this on with a really effect from this April, and are working to reconsider a realistic time frame. Sometimes you're an organisation, we pick, historically it's been 5 days for years. Some cases are done within the time, sometimes take longer, and I think what we're really looking to do is make a realistic assessment based on the type of complaint we get, rather than pick a target which we can't meet. We'd look for something much more realistic.
One of the issues apparently seems to be inter-departments getting back to each other, sort of responding. I just wondered, it says somewhere in there that you use a spreadsheet. Are you not looking to update the technology so that the complaints are logged and that anyone looking at it can see those complaints and dip in and out of the programmes?
Yes, I can. So the spreadsheet is a historic thing and is looking to be processed. I believe the new was recently approved for one of the Connect projects to bring in some digital stuff which will enable direct monitoring and production of data from the system.
And as councillors, will we be feeding into that? So when we're receiving complaints and we feed those in or deal with those complaints, will these then be recorded into the system so that, you know, they can be addressed that way as well, so that you've got records? I'm just concerned that if I was a customer, that when I ring up, that the history of my complaint is known, the persons that are dealing with it, when I rung, it's all recorded. And I think that's part of delivering a really good customer service, is having information that whoever picks up a phone to me or deals with complaint has access to all that information if you've got different staff on different days, etc.?
The customer service team have access to the spreadsheet now, so they should be able to provide a sort of as much as possible a status. But the new system should provide a better process, but I don't know how that will be fed through to members.
Oh, okay. So we can look into that, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Jim. You were saying that you're going to have a new time limit for answering complaints. Do you know what that timeline is? If we can't meet 5, do you know when it is? And the second one, and this will follow on, if a councillor or a member of the public, because we're still all members of the public, put in a complaint via email, are we actually going to get an acknowledgement to say it's been received? Because it's not happening at the moment, so we just don't know if that complaint has actually been received and it's gone to the right department. Thank you.
With your permission, Chair, I'm just going to answer behalf of Jim. The Customer Services Charter is a piece of work that's being revisited at the moment by the Strategic Director and the Assistant Director for Transformation and Customer, so I believe that's kind of being finalised in terms of the exact timeframes that will be associated with that. So I believe that's something that will be shared with all members relatively soon, but I don't have the exact time frame for that, I'm afraid. But yeah, we can take that away and yeah, get a bit more detail for you on that. With regard to member inquiries, I believe they are treated slightly separately at the moment from general kind of customer inquiries, but again, I think the sort of expectations about timelines for that will be set out as part of that new customer charter, and yeah, should mirror the same level of service, obviously, that's given to customers generally.
And my second point was, Naomi, if I send an email in regarding a complaint from a resident or from myself, I don't get an acknowledgement saying this email has been received. I mean, we've got a good email system, IT system, so can that actually be added in so we don't have residents or ourselves thinking, have you seen it? And then we know it's been actually received, and then we can, as Councillor Gadsden said, we can start tracking it, how long it takes. Answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shaw. Yeah, I believe that is something that's being looked at as part of the customer services charter work. In some departments, they do sort of auto-generate a reply just to say the email's been received, but I think in most cases it's kind of assumed that the emails hit the inbox, and I think it is just consideration about whether it's better for officers to spend time sort of writing a response just to say they've received an email and that they would be able to give a further response within 5 days, or just to try and maximise the resource in terms of replying as quickly as possible. So it's definitely a consideration. I don't have an answer for you right now, but again, we can take that back to the Assistant Director for Transformation and Customer.
Can I come back? You don't need officers to spend time writing on them. You can always just have it there. They press whatever button and it automatically, as soon as you send something, you can actually program and say, thank you, your email's been received. You do not need anyone to write it out. It's only the first one that we ever get. Sorry, Naomi, but that's the
I take the point, thank you. And as I say, I think some departments do have auto-generated kind of responses already, but that's not consistent across the board. I think just for the purposes of members understand, I think sometimes it's difficult to give an exact response time, because obviously I'm just speaking from experience with the Revenues and Benefits team. Different inquiries can take different times to answer, so it's sometimes difficult to say that all our inquiries would be resolved within like a 5-day period. Some can be answered relatively quickly because they're simple, and some obviously a lot more complex, so it's difficult to give a sort of generic answer that's, you know, is right for every sort of situation, but certainly I think that's something that, as I say, is being considered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we pass the microphone, please, to Councillor Milne?
That's on. Just a question actually on a different topic. On page 618 in Appendix 4, reference is made to having a single asset register. So presumably at this time, do we just have a spreadsheet of different assets? Or do we have a system like RBS Realtus or something like that?
Through the chair, yeah, thank you, Councillor Mills. The quick answer is yes, we do have a spreadsheet that sort of has a single list of kind of land registry numbers, which is a kind of our single source of asset information as a reference point. But different teams do have their own local records as well that they use for their own individual purposes. So, for example, finance have a need for different information than the assets team do, and again from legal. So the intention is that in the slightly longer term, we could bring all that information together into, for example, a digital system where all that information can be held. But there is a single source kind of spreadsheet at the moment, but it would be nice to bring all of that information together a bit more coherently.
Because a proper asset system has absolutely everything from chairs up to building sites. And that's the only reason I mention it. Was at a different council we're looking at that system, and that RBS system, and it was actually relatively inexpensive for what it is, and it gives us single asset register, and I didn't know if we had anything like that, because it saves the risk of something that's insurable that could be valuable that we don't know about, and then it goes missing, and we've got a lot of stuff moving around at the moment because we're in flux, as it were, with assets.
Yeah.
That was just my question. So anyway,
Yeah,
thanks. I think you've answered it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, I believe there is going to be a business case coming back to the executive in terms of some investment in a sort of asset system, as you say, at a future point.
Mm. Right. Yeah, Councillor Gavson.
Do we have regular audits, or how often do we have audits of our assets that they agree with, physically agree with what the records show? How does that work?
Okay. So, I mean, I suppose there's different levels of control. The first kind of level of control is with the asset team themselves, and obviously they have got their own asset records and they do sort of inspections. Obviously it's on a risk basis, so some assets will be inspected more frequently than others, but they have their own local records. And then I suppose the second level of control from an internal audit perspective is that they then go in and actually look at the control system in place, and that's obviously where this kind of recommendation has arisen from in terms of having the, the checks and balances around all of that as well. So yeah, that's basically how the system works at the moment.
Right, okay, thank you.
Did you want to speak, Councillor Hoy?
Sorry, because I moved my had moved as well. It was the first one was a comment on the very many revised implementation dates from page 6.17 onwards. I've no doubt that COVID would probably be a reason for that to some extent in the pandemic. There's a couple of ones, I think. Apparently, on page 6.18, the insurance arrangements, it's apparently got a report dated now autumn 2021, which I guess is in a couple of months maybe. But you've got the revised end date 31st of March 2021. Should that be November, October? I can't see it should be March if we're revising the end dates.
Do you want me to answer that one? I believe that should be 22 rather than 21, so I think that's just a typo.
So it's going to take 6 months to implement, 4 months?
Yeah, so I think that's... sorry, I'm just looking at the actual wording of the recommendation. So the insurance arrangement, that links back to the sort of previous question we had about the kind of asset register.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So as I said, there's actually solutions being investigated at the moment, but the work around that and investigating the digital kind of solutions available will take a bit of time, which is why the...
So that'll be 31st of March 2022, not 21?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Will that be revised? I assume so. And the next one was, just going back to the earlier questions about complaints handling, will you be forwarding to all members the new procedures which are promised for the end of October? Or will that be arranged so we can understand as members how the complaint procedure works now?
Yes, I believe that will be a document that will be shared with all members once it's ready. But as I say, because I'm not the lead on that, I don't know the exact kind of date when that will be done. But obviously, if there's a recommendation date, then we would seek to meet that deadline.
Thank you.
It was more the making sure we as members know what the new processes and procedures are.
Yeah, as I say, all members that will be shared with.
Yeah. That was it, thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. These agreed implementation dates, are these actually feasible, or are we going to have them put back again?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks, Councillor Shaw. I mean, it's very difficult for me to say, obviously, with 100% confidence, but I think, obviously, it's down to the individual owners of these recommendations. I think, obviously, each owner has the best kind of intentions when they agree a recommendation date, sometimes for reasons either outside of their control or limited resources, that they're not always met, but obviously Jim and the team do follow up on those actively, and if there is a deadline that's not met, he does seek to understand why and obviously give a clear update in terms of the audit report. It is something we always discuss internally as well at leadership team meetings, so it's not something that's taken lightly, but obviously, yes, occasionally there are reasons why the original date can't be met, but I'm not saying that's acceptable, but that's just the reality, I suppose.
And if that happens, like we've got someone 6.21, the date 30th of the 9th, 21, will the audit committee be told on a separate document that we can't have these will not be met? I'm just saying, if they can't be met, will we be told separately, or do we have to wait to the next audit meeting to be told, sorry, we've missed them?
So I think we usually assume that the date will be met unless we've got good reason to believe it won't be. And then obviously this is reported regularly to Audit Committee throughout the year. So at the next available date, the next available report, that would be reported that the date's either been met or not and the reason why.
Because we don't want to keep having, Chair, we don't want to keep having surprises like this. And I find it very frustrating sitting on 2 audit committees that I do, on 2 councils, that it seems acceptable that, we're putting the dates back. We don't really get the answers, and our external auditors then have to battle on with it. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just very concerned. Thank you.
Yeah, because there's quite a few that are due on the 30th of this month.
I think there is several. Dates. Oh, sorry, Chair. I think there's several recommendations that relate to the Constitution review. So that's one piece of work that is, needs to be completed, and obviously there's a lot of different factors involved in that piece of work. So I think that does relate to a number of the recommendations that haven't been met within the timescale in this report. As I say, I don't think we see it as acceptable, but sometimes there is good reason why something has to be delayed. But obviously it is within the gift of Audit Committee. If there's a particular area that you're interested in or you would like to ask, the relevant Assistant Director, that we could ask them to come to the committee and sort of give an update. Obviously, as an audit function, we are sort of reporting on what others are doing and their kind of response to the recommendations, but we can't sort of necessarily be personally responsible for each of those recommendations. But as I say, we do actively chase those up with the relevant directors if they're not being met.
Thank you. Okay. There seem to be no further questions. There are three recommendations set out at paragraph 9.1. That the update on delivering the 2021-22 audit plan be noted. That the conclusions and results from completed audit engagements in appendices 2 and 3 be noted. And that the updated status of audit recommendations in appendix 4 be noted. Are these noted, members? Agenda item 7, arrangements to appoint external auditors from 2023-24. The Assistant Director Resources, Naomi Lucas, will present this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly run through this sort of report. So the purpose of this report is to seek the Audit Committee's recommendation to Council to opt in to the appointing persons arrangements made by the public sector audit appointments, which are called PSAA, for the Council's external auditor appointment for the periods 2023-24 to 2027-28. So this committee has responsibility under its terms of reference for managing the budget associated with the external audit fees. And in practical terms, this means that you should be satisfied that the external auditor's work is satisfactory and that the fees represent value for money. So members may or may not be aware that at the moment the Council is currently opted into the PSAA arrangements for the period 2018-19 to the periods 2022-23. And under that arrangement, we've been allocated by PSAA the auditor EY, who are the auditors who will be carrying out the audit both this year and next year. However, we must formally respond to the invitation to opt into the framework agreement by the 11th of March 2022, to be ready for the 2023-24 financial year. And if we choose not to opt into that arrangement, then we must then appoint our own auditor by the 31st of December 2022. Under statute, it's actually required that it's full council that formally makes that decision. So Audit Committee is just asked to make the recommendation into full council. So that can be considered probably at the December meeting. So just to quickly run through the options that are available to the council. So under section 3, so firstly, the council could choose to create its own auditor panel, which must be independent and consist of a majority of independent members. That would mean that the council would have to carry out its own procurement process, which would obviously have a time and sort of finance implication for the council. But the main reason that we're not recommending that option is that we wouldn't benefit from the economies of scale that obviously the PSAA, which undertakes the procurement on behalf of the vast majority of local councils, can obviously lever in, and therefore the costs would be likely to be higher. Another key consideration is that if we were to try and appoint our own audit firm, that members of the committee will be aware that there's been quite a few difficulties in terms of available resource to carry out local government audits, and it does risk that no audit firms would actually be interested in auditing us as a small council because of the cost and time involved in doing so. So our best chances of actually securing an audit contract for the next few years would be under the PSAA arrangements. The second option is to similarly create an auditor panel, but to do it in conjunction with other local councils and to undertake a joint procurement process. That would perhaps achieve some economies of scale, but I think most of the points I've made under the previous option would still hold under this option as well. So the option that we're recommending is option 3, which is to continue to opt into the public sector audit appointment service. And as it sets out in the report, this is the best opportunity for us to secure the audit expertise that we need and to get the best level of fees. It also gives us the benefit of having an independent third party to deal with any contractual issues and to help manage those. And PSAA have advocated on behalf of local councils and between us and the auditors to make sure that we are receiving value for money. So we are required under law to appoint an auditor by 31st of December 2022, otherwise we will be in breach of the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014. So I've set out in section 3 the resource implications of that, but just to inform some of the members who may not be aware that under the arrangements with PSAA, they basically agree a scale fee for each council, which gives us some indication of the cost of the contract at the start of the contract term. That doesn't mean that's the final fee because there are a number of variables involved and a number of emerging risks, not just for us but for all councils. So changes in local arrangements within the council can affect the fee, as can new national risks. For example, there's often new legislation and accounting rules that are introduced which increase the complexity of the accounts that have to be audited. And the third risk is around if there is significant errors in the accounts, then obviously the auditors have to take additional work the following year. And again, that can incur additional fees. So at this time, it's not possible to give any kind of certainty over the fee level that would be that we would be subject to under this arrangement. But we do obviously currently have a budget for audit fees, which is currently £75,000. And we have been given some additional one-off funding this year in recognition of the fact of the increasing kind of legislation requirements that local government is having to face. And that's just under £19,000 for this year. So, as I said at the start, we are recommending, the Audit Committee recommends to Council that we continue to opt into the PSA arrangements for the accounting period 2023-24 to 2027-28. And if anyone's got any questions, I'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Naomi, do we know what auditors the PSSA look at, who they've got on their books, please?
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Yeah, they have a number of auditors on their books. At the moment, it's generally the big accounting firms, so the names that you'll be familiar with, such as EY, Grant Thornton, etc. One of the aspects that they are considering under this new kind of framework is the opportunity to extend that to more local and smaller firms to give them the opportunity. So that is something they're actively considering, but obviously there is a kind of a certain scale of firm that would be needed to deliver this kind of work, and obviously local government accounts in and of themselves are quite complex, so it wouldn't suit itself to say, a regular kind of small audit firm. The audit firm does need to be of a sort of certain size to be able to deal with this kind of work.
Councillor Carter.
Use the microphone. I have a couple of questions, please, through the chair. The present contact details for the present auditors, do we have those? And should a resident wish to write to the auditor, who would they send it to, and in what format? Would it be email or written through the address or telephone? And if the auditors are to consider best value, when will they do this audit work?
Thank you, Councillor. Through this chair. We do have the auditors' contact details, and we are in regular contact with them throughout the year. I suppose it depends on the nature of the kind of resident query. Obviously, the draft accounts were open for inspection from the period in which they were published for a certain period of time, which is now closed. So during that time, there is a notice on the website, which is still up there at the moment, which gives the kind of details of how the resident can ask a question about the accounts. I suppose in terms of other more general queries, I would usually expect them to be directed through officers. I wouldn't normally expect a resident to make direct contact with the auditors, so I would advise that they were kind of channeled through myself probably in the first instance, and then I could advise on the appropriate way to take that forward. I think there was another part to your question which I've just forgotten, sorry.
Yeah, it was if the auditors are to consider best value, when will they do this audit work?
Yeah. So each year the auditors are required to consider value for money arrangements for the council. That forms part of the overall audit. So they obviously audit the financial statements for the council, but alongside that they do quite a significant amount of work around the value for money arrangements, and they do give an opinion on that as part of their audit work, which obviously has been delayed again slightly this year, but the auditors are coming in to do their work in October, so we're hoping to bring back that audit opinion hopefully to the November committee, but if not, as soon as possible afterwards.
Councillor Hoy was next.
I don't mind actual members going first, as I'm a visiting member. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy.
Just out of curiosity, can you hear me? Just out of curiosity, which option is Brentwood Council working to or considering, do you know?
I don't really want to speak on behalf of other councils because I believe they're obviously taking their own reports, but I believe they are recommending the same option, and we have obviously been in contact with a number of the Essex authorities and believe that most, if not all of them, are similarly opting into this arrangement. So we've got no reason to believe that there's any kind of appetite to do a kind of joint procurement locally for an alternative arrangement.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hoy.
Thank you.
Thank you for waiting.
That's okay. Just a couple of questions. One comment. I just note the report does not contain equality and diversity implications. I thought all our reports should do so. So I'm a bit disappointed on that one. I'll move on from there to the appointment. Like Councillor Mr Shaw, I'm on the Essex Audit Committee, and it's quite obvious that there's a long-running issue around providing audits on time at the moment. I know we have that problem here as well. Is there a league table of the auditors, of ones which produce them quicker than others? Are they all the same? Is there a way that we could reject an auditor if we felt that they weren't able to provide us with a timely audit, for instance? So are BDO quicker than Ernst & Young? I just wonder if that information is available. If they do fail to produce an audit to the time scale, what penalties are there? Are there no penalties? Are we able to reduce the audit fee because of that? They're the two questions, because they seem to be the big issues with audit within the public sector at the moment.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Yeah, so I don't believe there's a league table as such for the audit firms, but I would just say that I think the issues experienced by us and other councils are but pretty much experienced across the board. So I think regardless of the audit firm that's been appointed under the contract, I think most local authorities are finding themselves in a similar situation. I think the obviously underlying factor for that is just the lack of available audit resource for all audit firms to recruit to, coupled with, as I said earlier, the increasing complexity of the accounts audit process. So I don't think that it is unique to any individual audit firm. In terms of whether we've got any comeback if we're not happy with the service that's provided, obviously our first kind of point is back to PSAA. If we've got particular reason to believe that the auditors haven't fulfilled to the best of their abilities their work, and there's a particular local issue, obviously we would make representations to PSAA. But as I said, if it relates to just the kind of factors outside of each audit firm's control, such as the general audit, the market for auditors, I don't think they would see that as a kind of legitimate reason for us to request a change of auditor, although it is possible in some circumstances that you could obviously have a discussion with PSAA about the auditor that you have been appointed. But I think in practical terms it wouldn't really make a lot of difference for us, as I've said. Yeah, so I think that's probably as much as I can really say on that issue.
Could I just ask one further question on that? Sorry, I didn't come to the last audit meeting, so I might be asking something that's been raised already and I've missed. And it probably goes back to the previous item as well. I'm very keen that we should always set realistic timescales to things, even though there might be a requirement for us to produce legally to produce the audit report or have it reported here by a certain date. I think it's much better that we set a realistic date, even if it's late, rather than being told that it's going to be late and it's going to miss the meeting. Is that something we're able to do, or is it something that we shouldn't really do because it's a legal requirement?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hoy. So obviously, at the start of the year, we make best endeavours to meet the deadlines, but I think quite early on in the process this year, the auditors were quite open and honest and said that it was unlikely that they would be able to meet the statutory deadlines as such for this year. So we have been quite kind of open with the chair of the audit committee that those deadlines were unlikely to be met this year. Obviously, government themselves recognises the difficulties with this, and they've extended the deadlines for this year and next year in terms of moving the original dates back from May to July and the July one to September. But even so, yeah, we won't have the audited accounts ready for the for the end of September this year. So I think, yeah, we have tried to communicate openly with members the fact that it's likely to come to the November committee. I'm still cautiously optimistic that audit work will be completed and we can take at least a draft opinion back to the next committee meeting. But obviously, as I say, there's no cast iron guarantees. So I think that's the best we can really do in the circumstances.
So what I probably meant was, is it not necessarily us, but the auditors, to say that they will be producing them in November rather than September? Because I'm sure that helps with planning, even if unofficially you know that.
Yeah, so sorry, maybe I wasn't clear either, but yeah, they have also been quite clear with us from pretty early on that they were unlikely to meet those deadlines, so we have been able to plan in our time to know that they're coming in October. So obviously that's aided us with our internal planning, but also enabled us to communicate that out to audit committee members.
Thank you.
Yes, I did make representation last year because of the lateness, and at that time they did assure us that we would be one of the first to be audited, but circumstances overtook things. But they do know that we are pushing for them to look at ours as early as they can. But we couldn't do anything about this one, and we didn't
I'm not
sort of understand
saying that.
that.
I think it's better to be realistic rather than optimistic.
Well, yes, but
all.
I mean, when I made representation, they did assure us that they would be coming in as early as they could, but say things just got put back a little bit. I think that's right, isn't it, Naomi? Yeah.
At the very start of the year, there was a possibility they would be able to do us early because obviously our accounts were ready on time. But I think nationally they've taken the decision to do the larger, more complex authorities at the start of the process, and also they have still got audits that are being completed from previous financial years, which obviously take precedent over the new financial year's audit. So, as I say, it's slightly out of our control, but as far as we're concerned, they are sticking to the October date, which they have advised us now for a few months is the date they would be coming in.
Any further questions? No? Right, members, there is one recommendation set out at paragraph 5.1. that the Audit Committee recommends to Council that the Council opts into the proposed central arrangements for appointing external auditors for the accounting periods 2023-24 to 2027-28. Can those members in favour please raise their hands? That vote is unanimous. Please lower your hands. Thank you. So that is carried. And members, that concludes tonight's business. Thank you very much for your participation, and the meeting is closed at 8:15.